that tore through the perfect stillness of our new home. A moment ago, this lake house was a sanctuary. Now it was just a house. My husband, Robert, and I exchanged a look of bewildered panic as a convoy of vehicles, an oversized SUV, a packed minivan, and a dented ancient bus, rumbled up our long, private driveway. Chaos that erupted from those vehicles was a force of nature. Kids, like a wave of colorful, shrieking locusts, poured out, racing toward the dock and our meticulously manicured lawn. Behind them, a small army of adults emerged, burdened with luggage, coolers, and an air of entitlement that made my blood run cold. They pointed at our floor-to-ceiling windows, at the cedar siding, at the very sanctuary we had spent a lifetime building. I counted them, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. 20 faces, all belonging to our daughter-in-law Emily's family, a collective of strangers I had met only once briefly at our son's wedding. And in the center of it all, beaming like a lottery winner, was Emily. She bounded onto the deck before I could even find my voice, her hug tight and cheerful. Surprise! I told everyone this would be the perfect spot for our annual family reunion. Didn't I tell you, Mom? A surprise family retreat, she exclaimed, her voice so loud it seemed to echo across the water. The serene, expensive silence we had just been enjoying was gone, replaced by a symphony of screams and shouts. My mind was a whirlwind of frantic questions. Why? How could she? Did she truly not see a problem with this? I was ready to unleash a torrent of politely worded but firm protestations, to explain the concept of privacy and the very personal nature of our new home. But before I could speak, Robert laid a hand on my arm. His touch was cold, his expression unreadable. He looked past me, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic scene of people unloading their lives onto our property. There was no panic in his eyes, no frustration, only an unsettling, razor-sharp focus. He walked to the edge of the deck, his hands in his pockets, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Emily," he said, his voice as calm as the lake at dawn. "I see you've brought the whole crew. We've been preparing for your arrival." The words hung in the air, a peculiar choice. Preparing? I stared at him, my own panic now replaced by a chilling sense of unease. Emily laughed, a bright, oblivious sound. "See, everyone? I told you they were the best." "They knew we were coming," she announced to her family, who were now milling about our front door, already making themselves at home. She had taken his words at face value, but I hadn't. I knew Robert. He was a man who planned for every eventuality, from a sudden storm to a market crash. The surprise he had mentioned to me a few weeks ago after Emily's casual query about our lake house wasn't a party or a welcome dinner. It was a contingency. And as I watched him step down from the deck and walk toward the bus, his pace slow and deliberate, I knew a different kind of reunion was about to begin. One they wouldn't soon forget, and one I didn't yet fully understand. I stood there, frozen, as he reached the bus and a tiny girl with braided pigtails pointed at a small black box he was holding. Robert simply smiled, and with a soft click, the lights on the bus's dashboard flickered and died. The little girl looked up at her mother, puzzled. I watched as Robert made his way through the crowd, a quiet word here, a gentle nod there. He seemed to know all of their names. He walked right past our son, Lucas, who was just getting out of Emily's SUV, a look of tired confusion on his face. Lucas looked at us, then at the mob of people, then back at us, and for the first time a flicker of understanding crossed his eyes. He saw the cold detachment in my expression, the unsettling calm in his father's. He saw that we weren't just surprised, we were something else entirely. And whatever it was far more terrifying than a simple, "What are you doing here?" As the first of Emily's relatives attempted to step inside our home, Robert calmly blocked the doorway. "Please," he said, his voice still gentle but with an unmistakable edge of steel. "Before you come in, there are a few house rules we need to go over. We're on a private system here. Everything is automated. Lights, locks, even the water pressure. It's a bit different from what you're used to. It's for security." He didn't explain what he meant by private system. He didn't have to. The look on his face told me everything. He had been preparing for them. But not in the way Emily thought. He was preparing to regain control of his sanctuary, and he was going to use every piece of technology at his disposal to do it. The game had already started, and they didn't even know they were playing. I watched as he held up a small device in his hand, a universal remote of some sort, and with a press of a button, the entire house seemed to hum with a new, subtle energy. The front door, which they had been trying to open, clicked shut and locked with a soft thud. Emily's mother, an enormous woman with a perpetually displeased expression, began to shout something about being locked out, but Robert just smiled and held up a keycard. "You'll all need one of these," he said, his voice still calm. "It's all part of the surprise." Crowd murmured, confused, as he began to hand out a set of sleek black cards to each of the adults. Cards had no names, no numbers, just a small silver insignia that I had never seen before. I realized with a sudden jolt of adrenaline that I didn't even have a key card myself. Robert had not only anticipated their arrival, he had created a separate, completely controlled environment just for them. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive revenge, a psychological game of cat and mouse where they were the mice and we were the all-seeing cats. I watched as the relatives, bewildered and suddenly subdued, began to follow his instructions, their previous excitement replaced by a vague sense of unease. He led them around to a side entrance I didn't even know existed, a small, unassuming door that led to a part of the house I had never seen. I watched him open the door, his face a perfect mask of polite hospitality, and gesture for them to enter. The look on their faces as they stepped through the door was priceless, a mix of relief and growing trepidation. They had no idea what awaited them inside. And neither did I. As the last of them disappeared through the door, I walked to the edge of the deck and peered around the side of the house. I couldn't see what was inside, but I could hear a muffled chorus of gasps, followed by a sudden, stunned silence. Robert came back around the corner, his smile now a little wider, a little more genuine. "Did you see that, love?" he whispered to me, his eyes twinkling. They looked like they had seen a ghost. I nodded, my own heart now filled with a strange, thrilling excitement. I had been worried about our sanctuary being invaded, but now I knew it hadn't been invaded at all. It had just been partitioned. I looked at Robert, my calm, quiet husband, and I knew that a man who could build a sanctuary like this was also a man who could build a fortress. And the people on the other side of that door were about to find out exactly what it was like to be locked inside of one. The surprise isn't a party. The surprise is the new wing of the house. The one that is completely separate. The one that is soundproof. The one that doesn't have any windows. The one that is filled with an uncomfortable silence, a silence so profound it is almost menacing. And as I turned to walk inside, I knew that the real game was only just beginning. I followed him back through the main entrance, my mind racing. A new wing. How could I not have known? Robert had always been the quiet master of this project, but I had been there for every drawing, every blueprint, every single meeting with the architect. I had to have missed something. As we walked through our pristine, quiet living room, the muted sounds of the lake once again reaching us, I felt an almost giddy sense of anticipation. It was like Christmas, but for a twisted, vengeful part of my soul. I saw Lucas sitting on the stairs, his head in his hands. He looked up at us as we passed. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" he asked, his voice low. "Why are they all in that part of the house? It looks so small." Robert's smile remained. "It's a new extension, son," he said simply. "A special surprise for Emily's family. We wanted them to feel at home." Lucas stared at us, a mix of confusion and horror slowly creeping into his eyes. He clearly didn't believe a word of it, and I knew he wouldn't. He knew his father's temperament as well as I did. Robert led me down a long, white hallway that I had never walked before. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. The end of the hall was a single, unmarked door with a small, circular scanner next to it. He held his own key card up to the scanner, a small green light blinked on, and the door clicked open. He stepped inside, and I followed, my breath catching in my throat. The room was not a room but a vast open space. The lighting was sterile, a harsh, unwavering fluorescent glow. There were no chairs, no beds, no furniture of any kind. Just a series of identical small sleeping pods built into the walls, each barely big enough for one person. There were 2 long metal tables in the center, lined with stark gray plastic stools. The walls were painted a dull, lifeless gray, and there were no windows, just a few vents high up in the ceiling. The sounds of their muffled voices were now more distinct, full of frustration and confusion. I saw Emily's mother trying to sit on a stool that was far too small for her, her face a mask of furious indignation. Her brother, a large man with a thick beard, was trying to open one of the sleeping pods, his face reddening with effort. It was a masterpiece of anti-hospitality. There was nothing comfortable, nothing personal, nothing welcoming. Robert had created an environment that was technically livable but emotionally and physically exhausting. The sleeping pods were just a few inches longer than a person's height, forcing them to curl up uncomfortably. The metal tables were cold to the touch. The stools offered no back support. And worst of all, there was no sound and no windows. They were trapped in a fortress of utter, soul-crushing boredom and discomfort. Emily, our ever-cheerful daughter-in-law, was standing in the center of the room, looking around in utter disbelief. Her face, for the first time since she had arrived, had lost its beaming smile. It was replaced by a look of dawning horror. She saw a bathroom door at the end of the hall and rushed to it, only to find it was just a single stall. I saw her look at Robert, her eyes wide with a silent question. He just smiled politely. "It's for security, dear," he said calmly. "We don't want anyone getting lost." I knew then that this wasn't just about discomfort. It was about control. Every single person in that room was completely, utterly at his mercy. And as I turned to walk away, I knew that the real game had just begun. I could hear the whispers starting now, the first hints of discontent, of questions and complaints. I knew that it was only a matter of time before the peaceful reunion devolved into an all-out civil war. And I couldn't wait to see it happen. The civil war began with a whimper, not a bang. Emily's little cousin, a boy named Leo, started to cry. A thin, pathetic wail that quickly escalated into a full-throated sob. "Mommy, I'm hungry." "And I'm hot," he cried, and his voice, amplified by the barren walls, sounded hollow and desperate. His mother, a woman who had been loud and boisterous just an hour ago, was now pale and flustered, trying to hush him without success. Temperature in the room, I noticed, was slowly but surely rising. Robert, standing beside me in our pristine living room, simply pressed a button on a control panel built into the wall. A quiet fan whirred to life, but the temperature continued to rise. He was toying with them. Complaints began to trickle in, then a steady stream. A man in the corner complained that his phone had no service. A woman with a large purse complained that her bottled water tasted funny. And then, the ultimate affront. Someone tried to get a glass of water from the single spigot near the bathroom, and a thin, lukewarm trickle of water barely made it into the cup. "What is this, Robert?" Emily's mother demanded, her voice now a low growl. "Where are the beds? The furniture? And the water, it's barely a drip." Robert walked over to the soundproof glass partition that separated their wing from our living room, a place I had never seen or even known existed before. He held up his hands, a picture of polite concern. "We told you, it's a surprise. Our home is a bit different. It's all part of the private system. You'll just have to be patient. We're working on it." He didn't explain that the private system was a series of hidden levers and buttons that he controlled with a quiet, terrifying glee. He had them right where he wanted them. I watched as Emily's mother's face twisted in rage. She pounded on the glass, but the soundproofing was perfect. It was a silent, furious pantomime. Our son, Lucas, finally came downstairs, his face pale and drawn. He looked at us, then at the frantic faces behind the glass, and his eyes filled with a dawning horror. "Dad," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "What did you do?" Robert looked at him with a placid smile. We're teaching them a lesson, son. A lesson in gratitude. Lucas didn't seem to understand. He just looked at us, a deep sense of betrayal in his eyes. He went to the kitchen and grabbed a water bottle, but before he could even unscrew the cap, Robert pressed another button and a soft, green light on the bottle began to glow. Lucas looked at us, his eyes wide with a new, terrifying comprehension. The water bottle was part of the system, too. A system that Robert had planned for every eventuality, a system that extended far beyond the house itself. Robert walked over to him, took the bottle from his hand, and with a soft click, the light turned off. "We'll get you some fresh water, son. We're on a private system, remember? Everything is automated." Lucas just stared at him, and for the first time I saw a flicker of defiance in his eyes. A look that said, "You've gone too far." I knew that Lucas, our peaceful, easygoing son, would not stand for this. A new battle was brewing, and this one was not with our daughter-in-law's family. It was with our own. The battle came swiftly. Lucas walked over to Robert, his jaw set, and extended his hand. "Give me the remote," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's over, Dad. Let them go." Robert's smile vanished. "They need to learn, Lucas. Emily needs to learn. This is our home. Our sanctuary. This isn't a motel." Lucas shook his head. "This isn't a lesson, Dad. This is cruelty. You're torturing them. And for what? For a mistake Emily made? She's not a bad person, she didn't think." The words were a bitter pill for Robert to swallow. I saw the flash of anger in his eyes, but he quickly reined it in. He looked at me, a silent plea for support, but I just stood there, my arms crossed, watching the drama unfold. I was intrigued. I wanted to see what Lucas would do. He had never challenged his father like this before. "I won't let you do this, Dad," Lucas said, his voice gaining strength. "I'll call the police. I'll tell them you've kidnapped my family." Robert let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Kidnapped? Don't be ridiculous. They're in a perfectly comfortable private extension of our home. They can leave whenever they want." He gestured to the door they had come in through. "The cards will let them out. They just need to know the rules." Lucas looked at him, his eyes filled with a cold fury. "Don't lie to me. I know you, Dad. You've made sure they can't get out without your permission. You're the one with the key card, not them." Robert's face hardened. He was not used to being challenged, and certainly not by his own son. "You're being dramatic, Lucas," Robert said, his voice flat. "This is a private matter. Stay out of it." Lucas took a step closer to his father, his hands still extended. "No, I won't. I'm part of this family, and I will not let you do this. Give me the remote, or I swear to God I'll smash it against the wall." I saw a flicker of genuine fear in Robert's eyes. He knew Lucas meant it. He had never seen his son so angry, so determined. The silence in the room was thick with tension. It was the calm before the storm. The final standoff. A father and son pitted against each other with 20 bewildered relatives as the prize. I held my breath, waiting to see who would break first. The stakes were higher now. It wasn't just about winning a petty battle against our daughter-in-law. It was about the future of our family. Then Robert did the one thing I hadn't prepared for. He smiled. A slow, almost gentle smile that reached his eyes, erasing the cold fury that had been there just moments before. He lowered his hand and placed the small black remote into Lucas's outstretched palm. "You're right, son," he said, his voice a soft admission of defeat. "You're absolutely right. It's not a lesson in gratitude. It's a test." Lucas stared at him, bewildered, the remote a cool, smooth stone in his hand. "A test?" Robert nodded. "Of your compassion." "And you passed." He took a step back, gesturing to a small, hidden panel on the wall. "Now go on. Press the button on the top right. The one with the green star. you'll find a different kind of surprise waiting for them. Lucas looked from his father to the remote, his face a mixture of suspicion and hope. He pressed the button. Across the living room, we heard a soft click from the soundproof wing, followed by a new, different kind of sound. A wave of gasps, but this time they were sounds of wonder, not frustration. Muffled cheers of delight followed. A woman's excited shout. Then a burst of laughter from Emily. Puzzled, Lucas walked to the glass partition and peered through. His jaw dropped. The sterile, gray room was gone. The sleeping pods were now retracted into the walls, and the cold metal tables had folded away. In their place was a magnificent open-plan space. The walls were no longer gray but a warm, inviting wood. The harsh fluorescent lights had been replaced by a soft amber glow from hidden fixtures. There were rows of plush, comfortable couches, and the single bathroom door was now the entrance to a spacious, multi-stall washroom. There was a full kitchenette in the corner, stocked with snacks, drinks, and a large sign that read, "Help yourselves." Beside a new set of floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see a massive outdoor patio with a fire pit, and beyond that, the shimmering lake. Robert had not built a fortress. He had built a luxury annex. The sleeping pods were not for punishment, but to create a blank slate. The discomfort and lack of amenities were a temporary illusion, a way to make the grand reveal even more impactful. The remote didn't just control the door, it was a key to a completely different and far more hospitable environment. Emily and her relatives, who had been on the verge of a rebellion, were now in a state of blissful shock. Emily's mother was sitting on a plush couch, a cup of hot coffee in her hand, a look of complete awe on her face. Lucas slowly turned back to us, a look of disbelief on his face. You did all this?" Robert nodded. "Of course. Did you really think I'd let your family stay in a concrete box?" He looked at me, and a single proud tear escaped my eye. He wasn't a cruel man, just a meticulous one. A man who needed to teach a lesson without resorting to confrontation. The surprise had been for all of us. The family reunion, which had begun in chaos and descended into a silent war, was now a true celebration. Perfect, beautiful, and utterly unforgettable family retreat, just as Emily had planned. And as I walked over to the glass, a genuine smile on my face, I knew we had our sanctuary back, but it wasn't because of the silence. It was because we had found a way to share it on our terms.